All right. Welcome, everyone, to SharePoint, the mother of all technology. This is kind of in honor of Mother's Day, since that was this month, and we've all had mamas on our minds a lot, among other things that the acronym could kind of be looked at sideways for. But today we're going to talk about what makes SharePoint so much more than just a document repository. We kind of have this knee-jerk reaction of, well, we have SharePoint, so we're going to put all of our documents there. And that's fantastic because SharePoint gives you a great place to put your stuff. Everyone can get to it. It's hopefully not buried inside of a lot of folders, but there's so much more you can do with SharePoint than just that. And this is part of the Joy SharePoint series that we at the Pate Group do for you guys. And I am Joy Turner. I will be hosting today, but I have with me also Stephen Wilson and Patrick Lipka. They're part of our Pate team, or as one of our customers calls us, Paters. So we are Paters. And Stephen has been working with SharePoint for quite a while. I just found out recently that he has been referred to as a SharePoint Jedi Master. So he's going to impart some of his Jedi wisdom upon us today. And then Patrick, he's been working with SharePoint for about 8 years now, almost as long as I have. So between the two of us whippersnappers, you're going to get a lot of heckling for Stephen as he brings his wisdom to the table. Patrick does a lot of development work, so I brought him here to be the voice of experience with developing inside of SharePoint and around SharePoint. Stephen does a lot of administrative and technical work on the server side of the world, and I'm just here for fun. So
we're all here for fun.
We're all here for fun. Yeah, this is a great way to make a living, honestly. But like I said when I first started, SharePoint truly is more than a document repository. It gives you a business solutions platform. It gives you a place where you can do custom development should you choose, and should you find those awesome developers out there like Patrick. You have the opportunity to use Flow now, which is a workflow platform inside of Office 365. PowerApps is coming. I haven't jumped into that very deep. Stephen, where do you stand with PowerApps?
PowerApps is pretty cool. Just the ability to create forms that you can use interactively on multiple kinds of devices without having to worry so much about the format is kind of nice. It doesn't have quite the flexibility of InfoPath, but for just being able to pump some information into a list, it's pretty neat.
Fantastic. I love the search capabilities that have just gotten better and better. Of course, I first started with Moss back in '07, so there was a little bit of search, kinda. That's really grown now. Communication. SharePoint is a central hub of communication, and we're seeing that more and more with Yammers, Teams, and Skype, all these avenues of, I hate to say it again, but communication inside of our platform while we're working. And then the ability to connect to other kinds of data outside of SharePoint information. So one of the first things I came to love about SharePoint a million years ago, before I actually did SharePoint full-time, I worked on a help desk for an engineering company. And I really saw over and over how SharePoint reduced a bottleneck for IT, that site owners, site collection administrators, when they're properly trained and they know what they're doing in the SharePoint environment, man, they just make it work. And those site collection admins do act as a liaison to IT, but they know who's supposed to have access to what, and they manage that day-to-day functionality. And it really does reduce a burden on IT of having to track down the right people, put in permission requests, grant access to folders on file shares, and, well, you did this one but not that one. Those scenarios that we used to see play out day by day by day. And IT is no longer responsible of knowing what data lives where. The business users and the data owners do that. It's their data, they maintain it, they organize it, they care for it, all the way through their documentation life cycles. And that is something I truly appreciate about SharePoint.
It's a funny kind of cycle too, because before I got into SharePoint, I was in mostly IT,
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started to get into SharePoint, there were a lot of companies that were recovering at that point from the fact that people had brought SharePoint into the organization without telling IT.
Yes.
And then, it all got thrown into IT's lap once they started having trouble with like their physical hardware or their drive space or things like that. Well, once IT, figured out what was going on, some of them were pretty upset that there was this, rogue application out there. And then they suddenly were responsible for it. Well, their natural reaction to that kind of was to lock it down, to take control. And so I think we're just now starting to kind of really get back into the place where the users are the empowered party. And the IT department honestly wants to get rid of it, as far as like they don't want to have to deal with it as much. They're fine with maintaining the servers and all, but they just don't want to have to know where everything is, like you said.
I
So I
think that's
think
a
we're
pretty,
finally, yeah.
such a common scenario where management would, it comes from the top. They say they want to implement SharePoint. It just gets thrown in the lap of IT.
Mm-hmm.
And really, if they don't have a lot of experience with it, I mean, you can start badly with SharePoint very easily. The install is complicated. The configuration requires a decent amount of knowledge beforehand. So if it's something that you rush into as an organization and you're just tossing this on the pile of responsibility that your IT staff already has, then so often you'll end up starting with an environment that isn't stable, or you're having trouble developing on top of it because you don't get that correct start because you don't empower your IT staff first, before offering all these features to your users.
And in a lot of times, especially '07, 2010, you saw where SharePoint was the redheaded stepchild of IT. And I can say that because I resemble that remark. And it was there because it came down from on high, thou shalt use SharePoint. And I actually had a presentation I used to do on this. Maybe I need to brush that off again. And basically, HR and finance and all these people, they get an email with a link that says, here's your SharePoint site. Done. And they walk away. And they're all sitting there going, okay, what does this mean? So they ignore it or they turn it into a file share.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It is just chaos from there.
Probably worth noting too. So StackOverflow.com did a user survey this past year, and SharePoint ends up being the most dreaded platform to work with. And but that's just from the IT side. And I think that it speaks volumes to the fact that there are so many people who use SharePoint because it is powerful. Because when used correctly, it is a fantastic platform.
Yeah.
But when you have people who when IT is treating it as this ancillary piece to an already large architecture, and there's no commitment to it, then that's where it becomes dreaded when people don't properly know how to use it, or how to install it, how to implement it.
I think there's this mindset too of, well, Microsoft makes Word, Outlook, PowerPoint, SharePoint, it's all the same, so everyone's going to know how to use it anyway.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Well, I think that's one of the frustrations that the IT department has is, a lot of other parts of the Microsoft stack are sort of standalone, but SharePoint really is like a touchstone for a whole lot of technologies. I mean, you've been doing this, 7 or 8 years. Patrick's been doing it for 8 years or so. I've been doing it for like 10. And probably at least half of that time for me, I've been hearing people talk about SharePoint dying. When Office 365 first started rolling, like for a little while, SharePoint was called Sites. And a lot of people who were in the SharePoint world were very concerned that it was going to go away. But it just touches so much. If it's in-house, it connects to email, it connects to Active Directory. It becomes a part of your storage scenarios. SQL is a big part of it. And so that interconnectedness can be very frustrating for an IT team that wasn't ready for it at first. And then when you look online, as much as SharePoint only seems like part of Office 365, and I've heard organizations like, oh, we're putting off SharePoint, like we're not implementing that yet, but we're all in on Teams, or and it's like you know where that goes, don't you?
Right.
Like,
You
all
just
that stuff
jump in that
goes into
rabbit hole.
SharePoint. Yeah, and so it becomes like that back end technology for other pieces, even if you're not using quote unquote SharePoint heavily.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And once people get it and they see what it can do, oh, it just grows and it spreads like wildfire, which I think is very exciting and it terrifies other people. Um, but when you start off the bat and people understand roles and responsibilities, who does what, who has the capability to do what, even before you even look at IT, which is a little backwards, it should start with IT, but you have this structure in place of these are the people that have, I call site collection administrator the little g God privileges. You know, they own that entire site collection, and then the owners are the people that really call the shots in the individual sites where they own them. And then you let your members come in. They have a say too. Our contributors and editors, they have a huge say in what goes on because they're working with the bulk of the documents day in and day out, and
Mhm.
they know how they should work, and they know what metadata needs to be captured. Oh man, a workflow would really be helpful here. Or wow, we could really use a task list to track this, or email notifications to go out when content's approved. You get so much out of them, and you're not even talking to IT yet. You're letting them do their other duties as assigned.
Well, I think it's a problem. Like you were saying, it should start with IT, just by virtue of the fact that IT has to bring it to people. But I think
Mhm.
that's been part of the problem with why SharePoint doesn't go right, because IT doesn't know a lot about SharePoint, and it takes them a while to get it installed. They're frustrated. They're not big fans of it after the process. And what they really need is somebody who actually knows a little bit about SharePoint, because like you were talking about metadata, a lot of people don't understand what the metadata is in SharePoint or what it can be.
Right. All the
You know,
potential.
and so all of the potential is the part that, if you're exposing your organization to SharePoint for the first time, you really need to come out with some really meaningful, I don't even want to say training, even though
You could say
training
training.
probably, well, I mean, training will be necessary, but I mean, just to get people interested, you have to be able to show them some of the basic possibilities, not,
Yeah.
not after custom development, not after it's been worked over real hard by professionals, but just
Right.
here's some
Out of the
basic
box.
stuff that you can do with it to make your life better.
You know, actually, when I do my training, one of the first things I say is, or include in my intro to SharePoint is why you should care.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we have SharePoint. Why do I care? What's in it for me? Because honestly, when you're at work 8 to 10 hours a day, the last thing you want is something more complicated. You want something to come in and take some of that burden off, make things better and easier. Computers are supposed, or not computers, but robots are supposed to be doing our jobs for us now, and we're all supposed to be on the beach, you know, 10, 12 weeks at a shot now from what, the Jetsons told me. So might as well have SharePoint come in and take some of that burden off of us. Make it make it work for us, not against us. Um, Patrick's got some insight into that with using, we were talking about it a little before we started. REST is the way it's going to go. And I just saw a typo on my slide. I'll have to fix that before I release them. Um, but using the custom development tools that are available inside of SharePoint, you can get all those random web parts that are just floating around on your pages into one nice looking tabbed web part. We use that quite a bit at Pate for our clients. You can have interactive maps on your SharePoint pages. You can create logical, orderly, nice looking forms without using InfoPath if you've ever gone down that route before. There's lots of really cool stuff we can do. Patrick, talk to us about REST.
Well, so I really like what I've been using the REST endpoints for the most lately with development is replacing the need for those standard display templates, which
Mm-hmm.
if you're a developer or you've ever worked with display templates before, it's an ugly syntax, and it doesn't. There's a lot of extra code being used, and it doesn't always. You run into weird events with when stuff decides to load and when stuff. Handling events, it can be difficult with display templates, and I'm not a fan of those. So to replace that, having these simple JavaScript functions where we're calling a REST endpoint, we're asking for all the list items back, and then we're going through each one and adding our own, little custom HTML, little custom CSS, and it's all packaged up into one single file that you can just drop into a content editor web part. And that, being able to rapidly deploy solutions like that without having to worry about publishing a display template or working with that ugly syntax, I think is a huge advantage to getting code out as quickly as possible.
What have we told you about using demo pictures from Mark's stuff?
Yeah, that is the classic. That is the classic hillbilly tabs coloring right there.
Hillbilly tabs. So those of you that have joined us on our webinar may have heard of the infamous Mark Rackley. I was asking him actually. I was like, "Hey, can you send me some pictures of, like, from presentations that you've done of like the tabbed web parts and some of your cool stuff?" He sent me like stuff that wasn't particularly helpful. I actually had to use the pause on his YouTube video to pause this at just the right spot so I could steal this. So he doesn't make it easy. But I love our hillbilly.
By the way, they call him the SharePoint hillbilly. So anybody who thought we were making fun of hillbillies, we're not. We're just making fun of Mark.
He took that name upon himself. In fact, you notice he looked at all the Arkansas references here. So he wears that badge proudly.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a jQuery UI like standard styling, but it really encapsulates a lot of Mark's style when it comes to application design. You've got rounded corners and a gradient because it's 2004, and you have I don't know just the and it's frustrating because I've used hillbilly tabs before. I like that code a lot, and you can use it to customize to be able to drop multiple web parts in on a single tabbed web part. That makes it so clean and easy to use. But it's just the default styling is just.
So you're saying
the blue and the green.
Better.
Yes, you can, and you should.
And you should. Noted. I'm going to email Mark about this later and say, can we please update our hillbilly tabs?
I tease him about that a lot, but it is very good. I really like hillbilly tabs as a resource. It's a great piece of code.
Well, one of the coolest things for me, and again, I had to steal this from one of his YouTube videos, and you can tell about when he did this by the style of SharePoint in the background. We got some good old 2010 going on back there with the Bing map. But look how useful this is. Some of our clients, in Pate, we have people all over the country. We have clients with people all over the world. So if you're having to go between campuses, office locations, client sites, different places for meetings, why not have all that information in SharePoint instead of having to copy an address, go to Bing Maps, or let's be honest, Google Maps, put in the address and map it. We can get that information right here. And even if it's not super useful every day, it's really cool that you can have your interactive map on your SharePoint pages.
Yeah, and that style of development too, where you're using the front end, you're grabbing all the data from SharePoint that you need with REST, and then you're feeding it into all these cool third-party tools that you can interact with JavaScript. I mean, you can do some great things. If you want to read coordinates off a list and then feed it to Bing's API, you absolutely can. And that's all taking place in the client side. You don't have to write any .NET code that runs behind. It's all all through web parts or script links. It's very cool.
And I'm hesitant to do this because I'm always hesitant to praise Mark, but I will say, like, when he first started doing a lot of this stuff, people thought he was nuts.
Yes.
Because this was not how SharePoint development was done at the time. And so he started snagging on to, what information he could grab from SharePoint with REST and using JavaScript to modify it. And everybody was like, why aren't you doing this by, creating a solution package or, whatever, and doing it the way that we're supposed to do it. Well, as we move towards Office 365, Mark's style of development has really taken off, and Microsoft has very much embraced that idea of using, the client-side development to to tie a lot of pieces together. Would you agree, or Patrick?
Absolutely, and I think it's part of Microsoft's push towards becoming more of part of the open web community. I mean, for so long, Microsoft has been kind of the punching bag, especially with the products like Internet Explorer, which has historically not supported CSS very well, not supported all these web standards that the more popular browsers now do, and they've made tremendous pushes towards supporting more more open and standardized formatting, and I think that's part of the effort with this development is that JavaScript development is still very popular, and people are doing some awesome things with incorporating it into a web application. And so the focus on server-side development, while it absolutely still has its place in SharePoint, now since we're going towards this app model and towards sort of pushing it off, into Azure, I think people are going to find that there's more flexibility and more things you can do now with client development than at any point in SharePoint's history, and that really you only need to rely on the server side for things that are just impossible, that there's just not a REST endpoint, or there's not a object model function that you can execute. But the gap between what you can do and what you can do with client side and what you can do with server side, that gap's getting thin. The client side is expanding a lot, and I think that's a tremendously good direction that Microsoft is taking with this.
Especially for the online versions, for the hosted SharePoint stuff, it makes it much easier for the customer because they've taken away so much of the server-side development possibilities. Widening what you can do on the client side has opened up a lot of things. Plus, I think there's a much larger developer community.
Oh, definitely.
And it just lets you it lets you put out stuff more rapidly. The amount of effort that goes into pushing out a hosted app or using the code behind framework is just, I mean, it's rough. I mean, checking and compiling and publishing. All I have to do with the great new view that Microsoft has, when you go into site assets now and you can edit the code directly from the browser window. I mean, you can roll stuff out. You can roll out web part displays and things in the matter of an hour, as opposed to spinning up the entire infrastructure, opening up Visual Studio, getting your project set up. It's enabling developers to rapidly deploy solutions, which is exactly what a business needs.
And without the hassle of WSPs.
Oh yes. Well,
All the good old days.
Still have its place, but
absolutely.
Just being able to move around JavaScript files and having that be your code base is tremendously easy.
And the IT people don't have to have windows where they can add the WSP and then work with the development team to check everything out after they've added code, and then doing the 6 revisions of it. It's just like, if you can do it from the browser, IT doesn't care.
Yep.
Less work. Well, Patrick, I think you've got a little demo you were going to do for us, so I'm going to come in here, make you the presenter.
All right.
So yeah. Are you sure? Yes. Okay.
Let me see what I need to do here. Click. Okay. So I have here on my little development site, I wanted to show you guys a simple task that I commonly use REST for, which is retrieval, just grabbing things from a list, which is one of the more common things you might see. So I have my task today was just demo showing banners on a page. So something comes up with the department, or you want to display some information to your users right away. We're gonna toss up a little banner at the top using REST. So to start out, I have a list that I'm going to use. I have the title field is going to be what the banner says. The active field, this is a yes/no field. This is going to decide whether or not the banner is being shown. And the status is going to correspond to the coloring of the banner. So in this case, we have critical, info, and warning, and each of them have different color sets. And so we have a little JavaScript file that's right here called banner. And from a development standpoint, so this is our REST endpoint that we're going to use here. We're just going to grab the list banners, the one I just showed you. We're going to grab a couple properties from it, ID, title, and status. And we're going to filter by active equals 0, or sorry, active equals 1, which just means we only want the banners that have an active value of yes. So one corresponds to yes in there. And so we're going to run through, we're going to take what's returned from this endpoint. So we're going to grab all the objects that come back in the list. They come nicely sorted in a JSON object. And we're going to run through that result. We're going to go through each banner and send it to our display. We're going to put a little bit of HTML code and attach some CSS to it to style up the banners. But this is just going to stick it at the top of the page for each banner that's listed as active. So I have this deployed as a script link. And so so this is what my page looks like right now. I'll just refresh it real fast. Nothing on my sleeve. And so there's no active banners right now. If we go ahead and edit this, and let's put our info banner up first. And let's set active to yes. So this is going to run, that code I showed you is going to run every time a page loads on this site. And so if we reload this now, we should see we get a nice little banner up top. And this is the info banner. So this isn't meant to be obtrusive. This is just meant to, put a little information out there. And if we wanted to, these will actually stack. So if we wanted multiple banners, we could. But say we wanted to display a more critical banner, let's go in and let's turn this one off, and let's display our critical. We go back, our user reloads their page, and they see a giant red bar at the top. Oh, the farm's going down for maintenance. Better plan accordingly. And we've used, this banner. This is pretty much the purpose of what we use it for with most of our clients, where we'll be planning on installing a CU or some other maintenance, and we put out a banner a couple days ahead so that they know it's going to happen. Emails often go unignored. Giant red banners on the top of your SharePoint page do not.
Back in the day, it was cool to get an email. I think I got over that in about 6 months.
So now, I wrote this about an hour and 15 minutes before this started, because I just wanted to show you this piece of code, this common piece of code where you're just going out and grabbing items from a list. I reuse this all the time.
So what if, because I'm going to be a user for you, so what if because I like that, but what if I'm lazy and I don't want to have to go set something to active or this or that, or I wanted this piece of information if something particular happens in a list or a library. Let's say like a task list is overdue. Could you have that script go periodically look at a list or go run and look when a page is loaded?
So almost like a job, like it's just going to check it every once in a while. So what I could do is I could throw. Is this in between page loads, or is this like the page loads once and then while I have the page up, I want to check it every minute or so just to see if there's any updates?
That sounds more complicated, so I'm going to go with that one.
So that one is actually nice and easy. You can already see I'm using some jQuery in here. I've already had that library loaded prior to loading the script. And so if I wanted to have this check it every 15 seconds, I could just throw this all in what's called a set timeout function, which is a nice jQuery function that once the page loads, everything that's encapsulated in that set timeout is going to run on an interval that you set. So if I wanted to have this go out and query the list every 20 seconds or so, I could. And the nice thing about the REST is it's fairly lightweight, especially a single retrieval like this. It's gonna do this asynchronously. Now we do have this is loading in the dock ready, so this is gonna wait for the whole page to load before it goes out to the server.
Okay, so you actually answered my admin question, because you said it's going to do this every 20 seconds. I was like, okay, what's that going to do to the responsiveness of my site?
Yeah, very little, especially if it's something as small as this, where the fields that we're grabbing are small. We're only grabbing the active ones. We're filtering. You can have larger ones that will have an effect on page load just because of the amount of data you're moving back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think the focus is always on, unless you're doing like a creation job or something where you're waiting for a long time, or unless you're grabbing another common scenario where you might be grabbing 400 or 500 records and putting them into a nice data tables to display, that's going to have a noticeable effect on page load. But
Okay.
a simple banner retrieve, a simple list retrieve like this, you probably won't notice it. It'll be
Okay.
a couple hundred milliseconds at the most. But yeah, I think the advantage here is just that because it is lightweight, it's easy to deploy, and if you you can have multiple requests like this that all get executed asynchronously. We don't have to wait for if we wanted to set this on interval, we don't have to wait for the last request to finish. We can just keep sending and receiving asynchronously. And if we have this set on a timer, we could do is also do something like save a cookie. And so if we were worried about server load, save a cookie, check the cookie, see if it's there, and set it to expire after 5 minutes. After it's expired, then go out and do the rest retrieval. So that way, the only thing you're loading on each page is a check for a cookie.
Gotcha. Interesting. So that could be beneficial for, I'm actually thinking of Olivera right now when she's always trying to wrangle us to get our timesheets done on Friday afternoon. She could just have you put this big blood red banner on the homepage. Be like, okay, people, do your job. All kinds of fun stuff like that.
And back to the idea of like empowering the users. Patrick, I don't know how much time you've spent in PowerApps, but how long do you think it would take you to develop a Power App that, say, the CEO could put on their phone where they could change that message and turn it on and off at will via phone?
Oh, you can make that flow in like 5 or 10 minutes. If you already had this code in place and it was reading from that list, you could make a Microsoft flow in 10 minutes that would edit that list, and you could have it. I'm just thinking of the possibilities here. I mean, you could have that be triggered by a text message. You could have it be triggered by an email. I mean, it's so easy to tie that into flow that if editing the list was too complicated, which I mean, come on. But if editing the list is too complicated and you want to leverage flow into creating a list item for you, I mean, that process couldn't be easier on flow. That's one of the easier tasks to perform with flow.
Couldn't you directly edit the list from PowerApps?
Yeah, I think you probably could. I have less experience with PowerApps. I've been working a lot with flow, so I don't have and my kind of triggers that I'm setting up are like, when a new item is created, or when this receives an HTTP hook, which I mean you can set up for receiving emails, receiving text messages, receiving when I update if I want to do a tweet and just do like hashtag banner, and if it's from this account, then put it on there. I mean, there's the possibilities are very wide right now.
And that's kind of cool. The way the technologies are all moving is, and as somebody who's worked a lot in IT, I kind of hate to say this, but it's all moving towards making IT work for the users again.
Hey, it ain't so.
Yeah, so that when they have a business case they need to solve, that's the part that IT or development needs to get into. But then they step back out of it once it's done. So the users are the one that can set what that message says, and when the message shows, it's just up to the IT and development people to make it a possibility.
Yeah, and I think that putting that kind of technology in the hands of your power users is going to give them so much more capability than, say, like setting them up with SharePoint Designer and designing workflows. I mean, how intuitive so much of the Power Apps and the Flow interface is, I think is such a huge advantage to getting people, both excited to use the technology because you can do some really cool stuff, but lowering that barrier of entry to be able to go and develop something that has a profound effect on your workflows and your SharePoint environment as a whole. I think there's so much possibility in that technology right now.
Oh, absolutely. All right, let me see. Let me see if I can figure out how to switch back to me.
I'm gonna stop sharing here.
Make presenter. All right, I think I'm there.
I don't see anything yet. Let's see. Okay, I see it now. Go ahead.
Yay! All right. So that actually tied really well into the next one about automating what we do. SharePoint, and I kind of feel like I should be careful how I say this, but we all work with SharePoint, so we all understand. SharePoint can kind of highlight for us, and sometimes it gets the blame, but it highlights for us a place where our business processes aren't complete or where there are gaps in our processes. So we go to try to make a workflow and we can't because, well, sometimes Bob does it, but if he doesn't like the person that sent it to him, then we get Mary to do it. Well, you know, you can't automate that. Actually, you probably could. But in a perfect world, we need our automation to be, you know, step by step by step and clearly defined. But once you can sit down and work with your people and do that, we can use all kinds of ways to get our processes automated other than using email. We don't have to attach a document to an email, send it to 5 people, where, by the way, we've just created 5 additional copies of the same document, and then get 5 copies back. So now we've gone 5 plus 5 is 10 plus our original. So now we have 11 versions of the truth floating around. We can automate it, keep our documentation in one place, bring people to it, modify it all from one place. We can do onboarding and offboarding with workflow. That's kind of the holy grail, I think, when people first want to tackle a big workflow process with SharePoint. It's usually going to be onboarding, or, you know, the end of that process lifecycle would be offboarding. Getting feedback on content or generating notifications, or those banners, like Patrick just said, are fantastic. We're getting SharePoint and Flow to do that repetitive email over and over and over again. But the beauty is we're not emailing whole versions of content. We're emailing links and bringing people to that content.
And that's a big point. I had a conversation with a user today, and they had a discussion group site in SharePoint, and they wanted to know how to attach a document to the discussion. And I told them, I was like, well, you could send a link to that item in a list, and they really didn't want to do that. They wanted to attach the actual document to the conversation. And that's fine if it's, you know, sort of a draft document. But some of this stuff does require you to rethink how you do things. Everybody likes just being able to attach something to an email or whatever. But as much as possible, don't attach the item to the email. Give them a link to it in SharePoint so everybody's working with the same document, instead of getting that, you know, replication that you were talking about where you have 10 or 11 copies of something running around because you keep sending it via email. If you can go back to the master source and everybody can look at that and edit that, and, you know, that will make your life a lot easier over time. It's not as satisfying sometimes as feeling like, oh, I now have the document. They have given me the document, because they've really given you a copy of it. And so, you know, you're reducing the importance of that document every time you make a copy of it, because then nobody knows which one is the real one.
Oh, and how many times, it's happened to me a couple of times, you're ready to present and you open it up and you're like, oh, whoops, this doesn't have that last change, or that doesn't have it. I've been in a situation where someone had to RDP from the presentation computer to their desktop and run that because the one they had on their thumb drive was a previous draft.
Right. And when you sent us this presentation, you sent us a link to it because we all share a SharePoint. You know, but you could have just as easily have dropped the PowerPoint in there, but then when you were making little edits, none of us would have gotten it. When you go back to change RESP to REST, we would still have the old one. So then when we go to reuse some of this content, we'll have that typo in there.
Right, right. And it's no longer the correct version of the truth.
Exactly.
And I know Intel years ago, I did some training for them. They had really consolidated their efforts around SharePoint because they had done a little activity. And they went and they searched their environment. They picked like a pretty well-known document title, and they did a search for it on every machine that was on the network, every inbox, every sent items, everything. And they came up with like well over 20,000 versions of that one document throughout their environment. So people had their own in their file shares, on their desktop, on their My Documents, wherever that may be. We had all these versions of one piece of information which really needed to be a single version of the truth. So links, not actual attachments, can really help trim down just the excess that we've got out there in storage, but can also make sure we're all looking at the same thing. And there are options for that. You can create a flow right from the lists and libraries inside of SharePoint Online. There are the simple and easy, not very complex or robust workflows inside of SharePoint. It does tickle me that they do still call out that they're SharePoint 2010, but they work. They're there. If you need to do a quick and easy approval on content or get feedback, something like that, you do a 3-state workflow, you can do that just out of the box in our SharePoint lists or libraries. If you need more than that, you can go to SharePoint Designer. Tread carefully. Maybe go to YouTube and watch a few demo videos first, or even the Office blogs, I think, have some good information on it. I use SharePoint Designer workflows, honestly, just to send out simple one-step workflow emails. New content has been added. Click here to read it. You can say exactly what you want to say, have the words exactly the way you want them written, and send that out rather than just doing a list alert. So lots of things you can do there.
Or make Patrick do it.
Or make Patrick do it. Patrick, when's the last time you wrote a Visual Studio workflow?
Oof. A long time.
Are you happy about that or sad about that?
Oh my gosh! If I never have to touch Visual Studio again for workflows, I would be very happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just there's never enough reason to do it. It's hard to find. I think it's hard to find a serious scenario where that's the only option. You know, there's always so many different solutions to a problem, and I just feel like going that unless it's absolutely necessary, that would not be the place where I would start.
Gotcha.
And right now in time is definitely not the time to go all in on SharePoint Designer workflows either.
Yeah, honestly, good luck migrating them. Yeah.
There's that, and we were actually talking about this before we started our broadcast. There's not been a lot of conversation out of Microsoft for what the future of SharePoint Designer is. If it's out there, I haven't heard it yet. But
well, they just had the virtual summit, and it was about 2 hours long, and I don't think they ever said the words SharePoint Designer all together.
No, they did not. And I know the Honorable Mr. Rackley and I were actually working on something a few months ago. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just run into Designer and pop this out. And I can't remember what function it was I was looking for, but it wasn't there anymore. And I pinged him. I was like, hey, do you know how to do this? He's like, oh, yeah, just go do this, this, and this. I'm like, well, yeah, I tried. You go figure it out. And like an hour later, he's like, holy crap, you can't do that anymore.
If you ever wanted to have a webinar where we just spent an hour like complaining about SharePoint Designer, I could run that.
Okay.
I run into if I have a page where I'm opening a piece of code that's a couple pages long, it stutters on the scroll, it closes unexpectedly all the time. If I'm trying to drop into the master page folder, it suddenly doesn't know where it is, and I have to go through site contents in the catalog folder. There are so many things on a daily basis that I gripe about, and I think they're finally washing their hands of it. I think they're doing everything that they can to go more towards, editing in the browser and performing tasks inside the web applications that are, that are hosted on Microsoft servers. And I think they've made such good progress on that too, and I really hope that they continue that so that we can finally, put SharePoint Designer to rest.
Yes.
I mean, it's probably got code in it since front page was first around.
Oh, most definitely.
It's always, I don't know. I'm not a fan of it, and I wish I didn't have to use it.
Well, maybe
I think the writing was on the wall when they removed the design view from design.
Yes.
Everyone hated that.
Yes. It died to me that day. I will say that. Sure enough. So beyond automation, we can connect to data that's not just data inside of SharePoint. SharePoint Online does support external content types and business connectivity services. So if you are online and you're used to the on-prem, that's okay. That's still there. If you're currently on premises and you're planning to migrate to SharePoint Online, you can do that, but you will need to reconnect the external content type definitions. So a little bit of work will have to go into that. But a lot of the companies out there already integrate with SharePoint. SAP integrates, Salesforce, Cognos, PeopleSoft, Oracle. All of those either have web parts that you can use in your SharePoint environment, or clever folks like Patrick know how to get them to talk together using, I'm going to guess, REST and all that fun stuff. I think Salesforce is the one you hear a lot when people talk about bringing in external data to SharePoint.
Yeah, a lot of those companies now have tie-ins with Flow, where you can just basically log into your account, you log into your Salesforce account, and manage all your data from directly from Flow, which is awesome. I love this.
That's fantastic. It's a brave new world.
Most of this I don't think will happen like if you have an intern in the sales department, they're probably not going to handle this part. This is probably back towards, kicking it into IT or dev's hands. But again, it's just a way to enable your users. So they don't have to develop the solution end to end, but they do have to set up the plumbing for it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But it's there and it's doable, and it's basically you can set up your one-stop shopping data portal right inside of SharePoint. Where are we doing on time? Pretty good. So, as Frank Sinatra would say, though, the best is yet to come. I think we've alluded to that a few times. Office 365 is just changing every day. New stuff is happening. The stream just went to general availability. It's going to slowly phase out videos. I started poking at that yesterday, and it's slick. It's very slick. Teams is giving us the ability to access our SharePoint pages directly from the Teams app, where you can communicate while you collaborate, and it's pretty awesome. All the interconnectivity that is there. Planner, it's kind of Microsoft's version of, am I saying it right, Trello?
I think it's Trello.
Trello. See?
I think those are two different things.
Uh-oh.
Maybe. I don't know.
With a Google. Then Flow. We've talked about Flow several times. Automating things directly from our lists and libraries without having to go to SharePoint Designer. And you can get to more stuff using Flow. You can bring tweets in. You can get alerts on emails, or you can send emails. It's above and beyond what the out-of-the-box workflow process is. With OneDrive, you can say goodbye to Dropbox, and you can say hello to Documents on Demand. That was a pretty big announcement the other day.
Yes, that was.
That's pretty awesome.
And for those of you who don't,
go ahead.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, OneDrive for some time now has had to sync the content from anything you connected it to in SharePoint, but they're changing that so that you will have documents on demand from SharePoint without always syncing like the entire library to your local machine.
It's pretty powerful, and I think that's going to be good for IT if they can investigate that and look into it, and then we can start getting rid of those rogue Dropbox accounts that are everywhere. She said, hopefully. We'll see, right? It's hard to.
Or the ones that are not so rogue, they're just obstinate. Like, some department put it on like the department head's credit card and bought Dropbox or one box for like the whole group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exciting. It is really exciting to see all of the capability that Microsoft is coming out with just day by day.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to
And
the bot framework, the Azure Bot framework. Since we're mentioning Teams, and this is like sort of a little side thing I'm working on, the capability to develop your own bots that you can chat with and have them, query all those different data sources and tie into Flow. I mean, just being able to like say, hashtag your list name and then type something out and then have the bot write an entry to the list for you. They are doing. Microsoft is on their game right now. There are a lot of cool things that they are actively developing that I'm excited about.
can you build sarcasm into the bot's personality?
Absolutely, that would be my default behavior.
Love it. I love it.
Like personality themes for the bot.
See,
Get on
that'd
that,
be
Patrick.
fantastic.
I'm gonna make some mean bots for us. There's gonna be some mean timesheet bots. That's what we're gonna do.
Ooh.
Just gonna start hitting up all. It's gonna email you. It's gonna chat you up on Teams. It's gonna it's gonna call your phone, text you on Signal. It's gonna hit you up on all fronts for every 15 minutes until your timesheet's entered.
Oliveira is going to approve of this plan.
She would throw a parade for you.
Yeah, I'm the primary reason that bot would need to be banned.
Yeah,
so
you would just exclude yourself from the hit list, though, I'm sure.
Well, that's the joy of being in IT.
That's right. That's right. That's the power. So to close out today, since Stephen was here with us today, we're closing with a cocktail, again in honor of Mom. We got Mama's little workflow assistant here. And this looks like the right way to end a SharePoint webinar, if I do say so myself. Stephen, where do you come up with your cocktail ideas?
I really don't know because I don't drink, so I just kind of fly at it. I start thinking around about the flavors, and then I try and get the closest that I can with something alcoholic.
I like it. I like it. All right. Do you have any questions about what we've covered today? I'm kind of monitoring the question board here and there. Looks like we did have one, but we'll get to that here in a minute. I cannot actually get my questions pane to open all the way.
I think I can get mine to open here. So we do have at least one question. Gordy said, great stuff. Would love to see follow-up webinars that are focused on implementing one or two of these solutions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because you did kind of leave out, Patrick, exactly where that code goes, and
and how that gets linked to the master page, how that gets presented. Yeah, that was missing.
Yeah. So I think that anyone who has interest in any of the things that we talked about here, absolutely let us know. Joy's going to do a follow-up blog, I believe.
Yes.
And so you can comment on that, and we'll see what we can do about following any of these little trails that we leave.
Yeah, I'll put that banner, all that banner code, and the deployment instructions in a blog post as well. So if anyone's interested in seeing that,
and we could just cross-link to those too, so that way, no matter which one you hit, you'll get the other. I like it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that necessarily Joy will follow up on all of them, but she'll.
I'll delegate.
She'll delegate, yes.
I'm good at that. All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your insight and expertise.
Excellent. Thanks, Joy.
Thank you. We appreciate all of you guys that joined us, and we'll catch y'all next month.
Bye.
Bye, guys.